I want to hear cannons. Three-step drop, throws on the end zone. Caught ball, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans reaches up with one hand and grabs it in.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
We don't even keep score. We just run that up and leave.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Throws up the middle. Heads intercepted at the 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25. 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl.
This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
The 3-2 Tampa Bay Buccaneers have a short week ahead of them as they prepare for Thursday night football. They'll be on the road, making a trip up to Buffalo to take on the Bills. Now, we've got a lot to talk about today on a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire Podcast. Welcome back. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew. Joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Evan Wanish. And not only today are we going to preview the Buccaneers' short week matchup against the Buffalo Bills, but we're also going to dive a little bit deeper into what makes the Bucs what a lot of people would consider one of the strangest teams in the NFL up until this point. So a 3-3 record, 2 losses in a row, back-to-back losses are not what you would like to be talking about at this point in the season, especially with a couple of tough opponents still ahead. But the Bucs have shown a lot of good. They have shown a lot of bad. So really, Evan, where do you want to start? Because we have got a list of a whole lot of statistics here on both sides of the football that they're going to break down pretty much everything we have been talking about ad nauseum here for the last few weeks. We'll also go over some of the latest injury news for the Bucs and who you can expect to be ready for Thursday night's game. But where do you want to begin?
I mean, you can start with the offense, and obviously, when you're talking about the quarterback, and there's a lot of pressure on Baker Mayfield now. I think for the first time all season, there's like a legit chance that it's not going to be this game, and it probably won't even be next game, but there's like a legit chance that if Baker Mayfield doesn't turn it around, that like the talks for Kyle Trask to be the starter won't just be, Gators fans, wanting to see Kyle Trask. It'll be things that are actually talked about inside that building, because, if you drop this game and the offense doesn't look good, that's 3 in a row. You're under 500 for the first time all season. Would not be a good thing at all. And and it would also be losing 4 out of the last 5 also. After starting 2-0, falling to 3-4 would not be good at all. So I do think there is, for the first time all season, there's legit pressure on Baker Mayfield to play well. And even if the Buccaneers don't win, I think, they sort of, even if they don't win, Baker Mayfield you still have to come away from this game saying, you know what, they didn't get the W, but Baker Mayfield at least looked decent. Where if you're looking at it, you're like, man, they only put up 10 points and Baker threw another pick and he had only 175 yards passing and the offense just looked stale. Like, that's what you don't want. That's the last thing you want, is for Baker to struggle and then to them also to lose. So I do think there is a lot of pressure for the first time all season on Baker Mayfield right now.
Yeah, consistency is something that we've talked about before, exposing some of these guys who have less experience. And obviously when you go from Tom Brady at quarterback to a guy like Baker Mayfield, who hasn't had time to settle into a system in a full season, there's going to be some bumps along the way. But I think for the Bucs, what we are waiting to see over the next few games is how he chooses to respond. Brock Purdy in a very similar situation with the 49ers. He was playing well. A lot of people had a lot of great things to say about him when he is, 15-1 over his first 16 regular season starts for the 49ers, one of the best, some people would say, system quarterbacks. And then once the pressure is on, he's kind of hitting some valleys lately. He's obviously not being talked about in a very positive light after not delivering the way people were hoping he would on Monday Night Football against Minnesota. So, is he going to bounce back? Is Baker Mayfield going to bounce back and show the makings of that number 1 overall pick, who has all the potential in the world that we have talked about, because he's played well this season? And, the endless meme of the Baker Mayfield cycle, this is the part of the cycle where he doesn't play that well. And then, the rest of it is, well, things fall apart and then he's ultimately on a new team. We hope to change the cycle, and I think obviously Baker and the rest of this Bucs locker room hope.
I don't think Baker's looking to say, you know what, guys? Now's the point where I got to turn things around in a negative way. So I'm going to be complete garbage for the rest of the season, and it's just how I roll. Yeah, I don't think Baker Mayfield's sitting there doing it. I think he wants to break the curse more than anybody. It's more than me, more than you, more than the Bucs themselves. I think he wants to break the curse more than anybody. So he wants to break that cycle. So yeah, I definitely don't think he wants to go down that path.
So diving into Baker Mayfield and how he fits into this Buccaneers offense so far in 2023, some interesting Buccaneers metrics courtesy of Joe Marino. Tampa Bay is the 4th highest in play action frequency percentage, but Baker Mayfield is dead last in the NFL in passer rating with a play action rating of 70.1. Mayfield is number 2 in the NFL in pressure percentage that result in sacks. Mahomes is first at 7.2. Mayfield second at 10.7, and Josh Allen third at 10.9. Mayfield's passer rating under pressure is 3rd best in the league at 97.8. His passer rating when kept clean is 29th out of 32 at 85.8. So as we continue to try and solve the week-to-week mystery that is the Bucs offense so far this season, Baker said himself this week, seems like we're starting to find out we're not going to be a run-first team this year. And, he's the first one, I think, on that entire roster who has acknowledged the way things are going. Tristan Wirfs had some positive things to say about it this week, but, he put a lot of credit onto the offensive line. He says that those guys have to get on the same page, which can be true. We talked about the play calling with Dave Canales and how that's got to be a little bit better, maybe a little bit more creative as far as the run game goes, which can be true. And then here we are talking about Baker Mayfield, the statistics you just heard, but a lot of the empty space on this offense has simply been because Baker isn't hitting the throws. There has been more than a few plays that you can think of, and Mike Evans drops aside, miscommunication aside, Baker's just been off target. And these are plays that work. These are plays that prove, when you look back at the film and these guys who are getting open, they prove that the passing schemes that Dave Canales is bringing to the table are more productive than they were last year at getting guys like Mike Evans open, at getting Chris Godwin good looks down the field. Trey Palmer has been open deep down the field a few times, and Baker just hasn't hit him. So as far as Baker goes, we've covered the best and the worst of what he has done so far in 2023, but with everyone looking for him to bounce back this week on a short week against a banged-up Bills defense, but is still a tough unit nonetheless, what do you think this week has in store for Baker, and what do you think so far of what we have seen?
Yeah, I mean, it's you want to be honest, like it's what we've seen has been what Baker Mayfield has been for his whole career, pretty much. I mean, it's been a little bit inconsistent now. The first 2 games, he wasn't perfect, and he hasn't been perfect in any of these games, but he wasn't perfect, but he got the job done. No turnovers was a big thing in the first 2 games, right? Protecting the football, being smart with it. Then his next 2, he faces a little bit of a tough test in Philly, struggles there, but then bounces back with, like I said, I still think his best performance as a Buc in New Orleans. In a tough situation there, being going into New Orleans on a short week, not easy, and a team that, and the Saints that doesn't really matter to seem to matter what quarterback is on the roster. The Saints seem to have the Bucs number. Baker Mayfield played really well. And then the bye week happens, and these last 2 games just hasn't been able to come up with the consistent play that we saw in the first 4 games. And right now, that's the book on Baker Mayfield. Like, that's been his story his entire career. It's why he's not in Cleveland anymore. It's why he's not with Carolina. That's why he didn't even, I know a lot of people say, well, he asked for his release. Okay, but he didn't even last the full season with Carolina. It's still a fact. That's why the Rams got to look at him, and then they didn't bring him back. He won that first game, against the Raiders with the Rams, miraculously flying in on Tuesday or whatever, playing on Thursday, win the game. Okay, you would think that would give him a jolt. He played like 4 more games. They decided not to bring him back. He hasn't been consistent enough. And That's what you've seen with him in a Bucs uniform too. Like you're starting to see that now. If he would have came out in these past 2 games and played well, you could say, all right, well, things are changing here. But right now, the evidence we have is this is kind of the same old Baker Mayfield. Now, with that being the same old Baker Mayfield, you're hoping the only difference is that he can turn it around, because the thing with Baker Mayfield is when things start to go bad, when he's good, he's good. But when things start to go bad, it doesn't turn from bad to good again. It stays sort of in that same spot. So hopefully the Bucs can figure out a way to get Baker Mayfield more successful, put him in better positions. And look, it's not the struggling offense isn't all on him. It's definitely not. I mean, we talk about that. It is so difficult for a quarterback, especially one that's not like a top 15 quarterback or not like considered one of the best of the position. It's so difficult to ask him to basically put the team on his back when there's zero run game. When he has to throw the ball 30 plus times each game and basically, be perfect. That's a tough ask. But at the same time, if Baker Mayfield wants to stick around, it might be something he has to do. Like it might be something he has to figure out and just find a way to play better. Like he's got to play with more consistency. And now you're hoping that, all right, you had a rough game against Detroit. You were a little bit better against Atlanta. I mean, hard to be worse than you were against Detroit, honestly, but had a little bit better game against Atlanta, but then, you had the crippling mistake down there in the fourth quarter. Can't happen. So you're hoping that he just avoids that this week. So it was like I said, there's legit pressure on him now.
I've said it before, and I will say it again. Baker is an easy guy to root for. I am rooting for him. I would like to see him succeed. I think the best thing for the Bucs, obviously, for the rest of this season is to have him play well enough to get another contract in Tampa Bay, just because you don't find yourself not necessarily starting from scratch looking at another quarterback next year, but if Baker doesn't play well, I have to imagine the Bucs are going to address the quarterback position. They're not just going to be ready to roll with Trask in 2024 if that's the case. And even then, you go into even more of a murky area with what kind of quarterback prospect you're going to end up with, because I think the Bucs are going to win enough games this year to get a first-round draft pick to where if it's a quarterback, I mean, it's not.
Yeah, you're not getting a Caleb Williams and Drake May.
You're not
probably at this rate. You're not even getting like a Michael Penix at this rate. So, what are your options there at 17th overall?
Right. Now, Baker has shown me this season that he has the tools to make the plays this offense needs him to make when they run the type of offense they want to run. In the games that they have won, or at least the games where the offense has functioned the best, the run game has been, I don't want to say a crucial part of it, because it's not like it has carried this offense at any point this season, but it's been effective when it needs to be, right? And Baker doesn't have to make all the throws. He just has to make some throws. He just has to make the important throws. And he has proven to me that he can make those important throws, and he can make them under pressure. Those last few possessions against New Orleans, like those were critical drives. The last few possessions against Minnesota, critical drives to hang on to the football and take control of that game. And they didn't do it through the run game. Speaking of the run game, we have plenty of stats about the run game, but the Bucs, I believe, are ranked last. You know what? Let me not even misquote this here. Let me pull up the exact statistic for you, because if I butcher it and I say it wrong, it's not going to be as effective. You know what I'm saying? It's not a very good look, I would say. This is courtesy of Greg Allman. It's about the effectiveness of the Bucs run game. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers running backs have 6 carries on 3rd and 1 this year. 2 first downs on 6 carries from 3rd and 1, both of those coming from Rachaad White. Overall, 3rd and 1 conversion rate on run plays is 43%, tied for 5th worst in the NFL this season. So again, Baker Mayfield is not the root of this offense's problems. And we were saying the same thing about Brady last year. But with what we've seen out of, obviously, this passing scheme with Canales, the $1 million question is, it's week 8 of the NFL season. Thursday Night Football, short week for the Bucs. They kick it off before all the other teams do. But is it too late to think that Baker could turn it around before the end of the season and start to hit those deep shots that he's just been missing, because there's been more than a few throws every week where he's off target. And by this point in the season, with a player who is as tenured as Baker is, I know he hasn't had the consistency, and that's what we're waiting to see, is if he does have the ability to turn it around and start hitting those throws and doing all the things that we want him to do to finish out the season. But do you think it's like too little too late at this point, or realistically, do you think he has what it takes to turn it around? Because I do. I'll leave it at that. I do.
I mean, I don't think it's a lost cause. I mean, now, he still plays like this. He plays bad against Buffalo, plays bad against Houston. Honestly, if that happens, I'm not even sure he plays against Tennessee. But like, if he does, like, and then he plays bad against Tennessee, sure, like, then you can say, all right, like, this guy's done. But I think right now, like, there's still plenty of football left, like, plenty of football to be played. And the thing about it, and trust me, like, everybody knows from the score predictions and stuff like that, and the season predictions, like, I'm not a guy who's gonna pick the Bucs to win every game and this and that. But at the same time, like, people this week, and don't get me wrong, it was a brutal, unacceptable, terrible loss that they had. Terrible, right? To the Atlanta Falcons. Detroit, I get it. Detroit's just better. Philly's just better. Like, I think they're two of the top teams. Even though Detroit got, shellacked by Baltimore, I think that they're two of the top teams in the NFC. Like, I'm not going to get angry at you for losing that game. Losing to Atlanta, like, you should have won that game, right? But at the same time, like, people this week after they lost are talking about them like they're 1-5 and not 3-3.
Yeah. Like,
they're talking about them like this team's projected to have the 4th overall pick in the draft right now. Like, technically, if the season started today, the Bucs are the 7th seed. Like, the Bucs are actually still in the playoffs. I mean, do I think they would make it in as a 7th seed? Probably not. I think their only path to the playoffs realistically is probably to win a division, which is still a division that's up for grabs, completely up for grabs. But, like, I don't know, man. Like, it just, there's so much football left to be played that, like, yeah, like, the correct thing is to say Baker Mayfield's not done. Like, if you have your doubts, that's fine, right? You can have your doubts, but to definitively say that it's over and this and that, like, I just don't get it. Like, there's too much football left to be played for me to come out and say that. Like I said, these next 2 weeks in particular are pretty critical. Honestly, if the Bucs drop both those games, and let's say the Saints win a couple games, and let's say the Falcons win a couple more games, now all of a sudden you're multiple games out of the division, right? Let's say you're 2 games back out of the division. Let's say you're not even in the wild card, and Baker Mayfield's still struggling. All right, then I could see maybe them making that change. But there's too much football left to be played. And I think there's a lot of, when you look at the schedule, there's only a handful of games where you're like, yeah, probably not going to win that one. Like, will they win all those games? No, but like, there's some games you're looking at, you're like, like, they could win that game. Like, it's not impossible. Like, there's a few. Will they win all of them? Probably not. You thought the Falcons was going to be a win, right? So, like, they're not going to win all of them, but like, there's more than a few that you're like, yeah, they can win that game. So, like, the season and Baker Mayfield season is just, it's far from over. Like, and I think fans sort of had in their head, right? Some fans, the fans that are like, oh, this is done, right? I think they kind of had in their head maybe like, oh, this team's going to suck anyway. Like, I think they had that in their head in August, right? And like, Baker Mayfield's not going to be good. And I think now that they had a pretty crushing loss, I do think now is like the window opening for them to be like, see, like, told you so. So I think that's what it is.
Yeah, the doubters are always going to be the first to chime in after any bad game. And unfortunately, it's been a stretch of bad games, specifically for Baker when we talk about the level of quarterback play. A lot of things on the offensive side of the ball need to get better, the QB play being one of them, but I still think he's capable. I think he has time, just like you said. And as far as the Bucs and the rest of this season, everything is still right out there in front of them. It is. I mean, for the most part, they are healthy. Before we wrap up and get into score predictions, we'll break down the injury report for this short week. But overall, you go into this fairly healthy, one of the healthier teams in the NFL, especially when you compare it to the injury report of a team like the Buffalo Bills, who have just taken blow after blow this season. So the Bucs are healthy. They're not too far behind in the division to be unable to catch back up with the winnable games they still have left on this schedule, right? we talked about how this division is not going to blow anyone away. Whoever makes the playoffs winning the NFC South at most is going to have 10 games, maybe 11. And that's with a really impressive second half stretch, which I don't know.
I think the winner of the NFC South is going to have less than that. I think.
Yeah. I think 11 wins is
I think
best
9-8 or 8-9
scenario.
might be able to do it.
Yeah. No, I agree.
8-9 did it last year. Like,
you're right.
Why can't do it again this year?
On the offensive side of the ball, one more position group we'll talk about before we talk about the defense here. Chase Edmonds, the running back, his practice period has been activated. He is back with the team, back on the 53-man roster. I don't know if he's going to play Thursday night. I have my doubts, but the Buccaneers have less than a week to address this running back room via trade if that is something they feel like they need to do. Any other position group on this team as well you think they could be active in possibly buying for at the trade deadline?
I would say safety, but I think the easy thing there, if you want to get Ryan Neal out of the lineup, would just be to put D. Delaney there. So I'm not going to say that. Tight end, I could maybe see it, but at the same time, I think they want to see a full season of Cade Otton. Without Cameron Brate, without Kyle Rudolph, without those guys taking A snaps away from them. Really, the only obvious one is running back. Pass rusher, sure, but I don't know. I feel like all the pass rushers that are reportedly available, and look, there's some guys that you hear about and they're like, oh, he's available, and he's actually not. And then there's some guys that you don't hear about that actually are available. In 2018, you didn't know Jason Pierre-Paul was available, until the Buccaneers traded for him. There's tons of players like that. But a lot of the names you hear as far as edge rusher goes are kind of bigger names, like Danielle Hunter and Chase Young. I don't think the Buccaneers are going to be in that sort of market. Anything that's going to take a day 2 pick, I don't see it. So I wouldn't really expect that. I think running back's the only one. I'm still on record as saying I'd be pretty surprised if they did anything. I just don't think they're in a position to, move any type of draft asset or anything like that. And they also have very limited cap space, so you have to consider that as well. The money is tight. And the money's going to continue to be tight all year. So the one thing, and I understand people bring up Rashad Penny. I'm against the idea of Rashad Penny solely because
they already passed on him once before.
They had a chance to get him for just money. He signed a 1-year deal for the vet or close to the vet minimum. You could have had him 5 months ago. Why are you going to potentially give up a draft pick now to get him when you're already mid-season, when you could have already had him? So that's Rashad Penny. Now, I know a lot of people are going to bring up the biggest one is probably, and the biggest one I think is realistic because, they're not trading for Derrick Henry, folks. I can tell you that right now. It's not going to happen. I'm sure the Buccaneers would love to have Derrick Henry. If the Titans want to eat half his salary and only take a 7th-round pick, all right, come on down. But don't think that's going to happen. The only realistic one that I think fans are looking at, and they're like, oh, that's a big name, is Dalvin Cook. From the Jets, things haven't really worked out there. It was always kind of a weird spot, because they had Michael Carter, they had Breece Hall, and then Dalvin Cook sort of fitting in there hasn't really worked, especially with, Aaron Rodgers going down, sort of lowers the expectations a little bit of that team. So there's maybe a thought that Dalvin Cook could get moved. And I do think he could get moved. The only way I would see it making sense for the Buccaneers, and apparently something about how his contract is structured, they only need to pay a little bit, so it's not huge on the cap stuff. But I could see a late round pick swap, the Bucs give up their 2025 7th in exchange, or their 2025 6th in exchange for a 2025 7th and Dalvin Cook or something like that. But I don't know if the Jets even want to do that. The Jets might as well just maybe want to hold on to him if that's the best offer they're getting. So for that reason, I don't think the Buccaneers are going to be doing anything at the deadline. I know that frustrates some people. I've talked to some people this week that are like, hey, they're going to do anything. And I'm like, no. And they're like, why? So I know that it's going to be frustrating for some people, but it's just the truth. And, really haven't done much of the deadline in Jason Light's history. I think that the first year they traded Mark Barron and I think somebody else at the deadline. Steve McClendon in 2020 wasn't at the deadline, but it was a little bit before the deadline. I mean, historically, they haven't really done a ton at the trade deadline.
Mark Barron. What a name that is. I actually saw a guy walking down the road the other day with a Mark Barron jersey, and I got really excited.
There you go.
Because you don't see a lot of those walking around anymore. One more question, and this is just a narrative that people have attached themselves to regarding the Bucs maybe not doing anything at the trade deadline. And we've been saying for a while, I think at least the last 2 or 3 weeks, that, don't be surprised if the Bucs do not do anything at the trade deadline. There's going to be a lot of hype. There's going to be a lot of stories put out about all these big flashy names the Bucs could go get. But one of the narratives I have seen lately is that, this coaching staff and this front office, this team is just not serious about winning this year unless they want to make a move for one of these big names, which is hard. It's hard to say that and to put that on the team when realistically going into this year, as we have said all along, like you kind of should have known that this wasn't a team that's going to go out on a limb to try and compete for anything. Like they're just going to kind of roll with what they have, and that's what they've done all year.
Right. I don't understand why it's such a shock. Just like you said, like the sentiment I start to get is like, oh yeah, they don't care. Yep, they're good with this. Yep, this is acceptable to them now. Like, oh, Brady's gone. Yep, this is acceptable to them.
Like, what resources are you willing to give up to go out and get a Dalvin Cook, who, again, has not been an earth shaker for New York? It's not like this is a
like
guy...
He's not the Dalvin Cook from 3 years ago.
Right. It's going to be the equivalent of signing Le'Veon Bell a couple of years ago. Like, that's the energy that it gives me. Just big names for the sake of big names are not always going to be what this team needs. And, there's a lot of things that this team needs, this offense in particular, that we just talked about, and it starts with a lot more than just the running backs.
No, for sure. And, the thing is, one running back isn't going to fix an entire offense, right? And we've talked about the run game, and I want to get on the defense because we've talked a while about the offense, but this will be the last thing I want to say on it. We talked about the run game, and we've said it countless times. It's more than just the running backs. The running backs definitely have a hand, but it's the offensive line, it's the play caller. You could have prime Walter Payton back there. It wouldn't matter. Would it be a little bit better? Probably, but it's not going to be this, oh my God, this is, a top 5 run game. No, like everything else has to be better. Everything else around the running backs has to be better. So, I don't really think it's an easy fix like that. I don't expect them to do anything at the deadline. And I know that's going to disappoint some people, but just like you said, like they're trying to see what they have this year. Like it's okay. Why? And honestly, I think a lot of fans accepted that in May and June and July. Like, and I guess sort of you say that before you actually see any games. And when you're in the moment, you're like, oh, gotta get this guy, gotta get this guy. Why were you all right with you were content? And now all of a sudden you want to be trading a bunch of draft picks for guys who, and most of the time, the guys that are traded at the trade deadline are either going to be free agents at the end of the year or the year after. So they're not here very long. Like you're going to trade for Dalvin Cook. Okay. There's only a handful more games on that contract because it's a 1-year deal. Like he is a rental. So, I think fans kind of get a little impatient at times, and I get it. I do. You wanted the team to do a move when things aren't going hot, but at the same time, sometimes the best move you can make is no move at all. And I think that's where the Buccaneers are at right now.
Yeah, 3-1 start gets a lot of people excited, and they have every reason to be excited when the team plays above expectations, and it makes it a lot easier to buy in to what this coaching staff is bringing to the table. I totally understand why people would go back to, hey, well, they're proving they can compete. A 3-1 start in the NFL is not easy, and people bought in. So I understand, but like you said, I do think sometimes we get a little impatient, and people forget the perspective of this 2023 season and the situation the Bucs found themselves in literally just a few months ago as they were scrambling to put together the pieces of what would be the payroll for this team, and some more stuff we're going to have to tackle in the upcoming offseason. But talking about the defense, here are the blanket stats that we wanted to bring up. And again, just a good consensus about what we have seen from this Buccaneers defense. The Bucs have the best red zone defense in the NFL. Yes, I'll say it again. They have statistically the best red zone defense in the National Football League, allowing only a touchdown on 22.2% of trips to the red zone. The Bucs have the worst third down defense in the NFL. That's right. They have the worst third down defense in the National Football League, allowing a conversion 50% of the time. The Bucs also force a turnover on 21% of drives, which is the best in the league. 13 takeaways in 6 games, at least 2 takeaways in 5 of 6 games. We've obviously covered the importance of having a defense that can take the ball away. And, a bend but don't break defense is an identity that a Bucs defense has had before. And they've been good. We've seen good Tampa Bay defenses that know how to bend but not break. And that's what we have seen with this defense. They have played well enough for the offense to go out there and win some games. Warren Sapp used to say back in the day to the offense, you get us 17 and we'll win. You don't have an offense that can get you 17 points every single week, clearly. But both sides of the spectrum here on the defensive side of the ball as well. Kind of, the polarizing stats on the offensive side of the ball trickle over to the other side here as we talk about the best and the worst of this defense so far this season. What do you think?
Yeah, those two stats are, pretty much something. And honestly, though, you can feel it watching the games, though. Like, none of those stats are, like, unbelievable to me, where you're like, wow. Like, there's some stats, when you read them, you're like, that can't be real. Like, no, those stats feel real. Like, when you watch the games, you're like, yeah, like, this is, the Bucs do a pretty good job at holding teams to 3. Like, when the Bucs had that turnover against the Lions, the interception, like, the Lions got 3 points. Like, that was a big stand. That ball was at the 8-yard line.
0 yards. They got no yards in the red zone.
Yeah, like that was a big stand. Like, and the Bucs defense is if the Bucs defense was putrid, like, this team isn't 3-3 right now. Like they're just not, because you don't get the 3 turnovers in Minnesota. Like, you don't do that, so you lose that game. And then who knows, if the defense even shuts down the Saints or anything. Like, who knows, right? Even the defense sealed the game late against the Bears. That was, the Bucs were up 20-17 at the time. People kind of forget that the Bears could have taken a lead with a touchdown there, and the Bucs defense got a pick 6. Like, that's, the defense has really bailed them out. At the same time, though, and it's been magnified these past few weeks, third down defense has been their issue. Like, when I say that if the defense was horrible, the Bucs aren't 3-3. Well, if the defense was better on third down, the Bucs are better than 3-3 right now. The Bucs are probably 4-2. I don't know the formula for it. I don't know how to fix it. That's not my job. That's Todd Bowles' job. And unfortunately, on a short week, not the greatest time to be able to fix it. Hopefully, with this sort of mini bye week, they'll be able to figure it out after the Bill. Well, hopefully it doesn't affect them too much in the Bills game, right? Hopefully it's not an issue. But if it is, hopefully you can regroup after the mini bye and figure it out. But I do think and we've talked about it before, like, the lack of pass rush, I think, specifically on third down, has definitely hurt them more than helped. It seems like the stats, I believe the Bucs have 16 sacks. It's 17th in the NFL right now, right in the middle of the pack. Literally right almost dead smack in the middle of the pack. And the actual box score is okay, but when you watch it, right, the eye test just doesn't show it. And when teams are converting these 3rd and 11s, 3rd and 12s, it's because the quarterbacks have all day to throw, and the Bucs are probably most of the time on 3rd and long. They're playing zone, which we know isn't their best, strong suit. They're playing zone, and guess what? A good quarterback is going to be able to dissect it. Like, Derek Carr isn't as good of a quarterback as Jared Goff. Like, Derek Carr couldn't dissect that. He still had a ton of time, but he couldn't find the guys. Jared Goff had a ton of time and could find the guys. Like that, the third down defense won't get truly better, I think, until this pass rush does.
We've talked before about the physicality of a lot of those guys in the Buccaneers secondary. Antoine Winfield Jr., obviously, but Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean in particular. Man coverage is where they made their money. So with Todd Bowles having coached this unit since 2019, Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean both on the team that season, why does he not live by more man coverage at this point? Like, why does it seem like every week we're still kind of testing the waters of what this zone coverage is going to look like? And every single week it gets picked apart. It gives you shades of Mike Smith's soft zone coverage that, they used to play in 2018 that got his ass canned halfway through the season because the Bucs could not help but give up 20 yards on 3rd and 15. It's exactly what we've seen before. And I don't want to say it's a new problem for this Todd Bowles defense because I feel like the Bucs' third down defense and
no, it's been frustrating. It hasn't been quite this bad, but it has been a frustration of fans, I think, for a little bit. Yeah.
And even the pass rush. I mean, honest to God, even when this defense was at its best in 2020 and 2021, even when they never had a ferocious pass rush. In the Super Bowl, they did. In the playoffs, they had a pretty damn good pass rush when they needed to in 2020. But during the regular season, we spent a lot of that year asking, hey, what's going on with the pass rush? Like, these guys are not getting home with 4.
There was, headed into that playoffs, there was debate on whether to give Shaq Barrett a long-term contract or not.
Yeah.
There was a lot of people that said, no, absolutely not. And then he went out in the playoffs and was fantastic in the NFC Championship game and the Super Bowl, and everybody was like, oh, you got to keep him now. Like, there was a legit debate. That's how sort of like up and down the Bucs pass rush was that year. And 2021, same thing. Like, it hasn't been and the Bucs defense, I wouldn't say they've been an elite unit, but like the pass rush hasn't, like, I don't even think like at no time during the Todd Bowles era, which is 2019 to now, right? Then no time during the Todd Bowles era has this defense been a top 5 unit, maybe even like top 7 or 8 unit at rushing the passer. Like, they just haven't been. And sometimes they get a lot of sacks because they blitz a lot. Like, and now what are you seeing? Todd Bowles is blitzing less, and now they're getting less sacks.
Well, and you want to just go back to stats, something that's as plain as day in the box score week after week is the lack of production from Devin White. What does he have, 1 sack this season? This is 0.
Devin White has 0 sacks.
This is a guy who was widely considered, as of a couple of years ago, one of the best off-ball linebackers in the NFL. And one of his biggest strengths is his usage in this defense getting after the quarterback. And he just has not been able to do that. I mean, it's an entirely different conversation in itself that this is the same linebacker who wants to be paid $100 million contract.
Well, I was just about to say his sack total is the same amount of money that I'm offering him this offseason.
Oh,
0.
Man, that's a conversation for a different day, and obviously that time will come. Devin White, looking for him to bounce back because he definitely has not been the player that I think the Bucs had hoped he would be up until this point of the season. That is for sure, with the price tag that he thinks he is worth. But again, just going back to the philosophy of this defense, I'm surprised that Todd Bowles doesn't really seem to know better by now. Like, I would hope adjustments are made to where this isn't going to be an issue for the rest of the year, but complacency with this coaching staff, at least under Todd Bowles as head coach, maybe Dave Canales is saying the right things week in and week out, but we have also talked about complacency with the Bucs and this coaching staff. We talked about it a lot throughout the 2022 season.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that haven't really broke the Bucs' way this year on defense. For as good as the defense has been, like we said, the defense is the reason right now we're not already talking about maybe the season being a lost cause. Like, the defense has kept them in. The defense kept them in the Philly game for a good bit. The defense kept them in the Detroit game for a good bit. The defense, I mean, to be completely fair, I guess, the defense forced 3 turnovers. Yes, all the turnovers were down the red zone, though. So the Falcons were moving the ball, but they still forced them. So the defense gave the Bucs a shot to win that game. Like, and I know the defense came up short, like at the end. Like, I already talked about that. I think it was unacceptable, but at the same time, don't score 13 points. How about you score more than 13?
At the end of the day, I don't want to go back and harp on this game because we know it was an ugly loss. But when we talk about the defense, they gave Baker Mayfield and the offense 2 chances to win that game, not 1. 2, because they got the stops that they needed after the red zone interception on a drive that could have put the Bucs up, and then the offense couldn't do anything with the ball after that. So again, talking about what you had just said, that same scenario, when you look at the end of the game last week, it's hard to pin that on the defense, and that's kind of been the story of this Bucs team so far this year.
Yeah, so as good as the defense has been, though, Devin White's been a disappointment. I think Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, I don't know if I would say disappointment, but I think the Bucs were hoping for a little bit more. Shaq Barrett, it's tough, with his whole situation, coming off the injury, having the rough offseason. But like I've said at the same time, if you're good enough to play, man, like you gotta go out there and play. And like Shaq Barrett hasn't quite been the same player. Now he did get a sack, right, on Sunday against the Falcons. Hopefully that gets him going a little bit. But he hasn't been the same player. Vita Vea has been sackless in his last 2 games after having 3.5 in the first 4 games, no sacks in the last 2. So really, I mean, this pass rush has to be better. And I even think, and I was talking about this with James the other day. Like Jamel Dean and Carlton Davis, like they haven't even really been that great. And like part of it, a lot of people are going to say, well, Bowles is playing off coverage. And like, I get it. Like I definitely do. Just like you said, I don't know why. Like I'm not a defensive coach. Todd Bowles knows more football right now than I will ever know in my entire life. I'm not claiming that, but at the same time, it does make sense. Like play man coverage. Like you don't have to play exclusively, but like you should be playing it more than you are because you're just getting burned in zone coverage. I mean, these good quarterbacks are just killing them in zone coverage. And guess what? You got a pretty good one coming up.
A mediocre quarterback with time in the pocket is going to tear you up on zone coverage. Unfortunately with a pass rush who isn't going to get pressure with just 4 down linemen, more times than not, unless you can generate pressure with the blitz or just these guys play better, it's what's going to happen. But let's talk about a lineup change in the injury report as we wrap up this week's episode with our game picks. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we got a lineup change. Offensive lineman Matt Filer at left guard with a knee injury will not be playing. So Aaron Stinney will see his first regular season action for the Bucs, I think, in over a year. I think over 2 years because he had that injury.
Yeah.
So Aaron Stinney, the guard who stepped up in that Super Bowl postseason run for the injured Alex Kappa, will get some first-team reps with the Bucs this week. And for a lot of people, I don't know how good a new face is going to do in the long run because we have talked about this situation before. Talked about it last year with Sean King when the Bucs made the decision to pull Luke Gedeke from that guard spot. It could look like a good move for the first 2 games, but once you start playing week in and week out, if Filer does not come back into the lineup and Stinney is the guy moving forward, how good is he going to be for how long? I mean, we'll cross that bridge, obviously, when we come to it, but Aaron Stinney, in my opinion, a more than capable backup, and that's why he's still on the roster up until this point, too.
Yeah, I mean, I think he definitely is, but you just said backup. Like how is he going to perform as a starter? Now, I mean, he was great in the Super Bowl run, right? But that was a little bit ago, right? Like you're starting to get to the point where you can't use that, right? Everybody wants to discount it for Devin White, and everybody wants to say, well, Devin White was really good during the Super Bowl run, this and that, right? But then, like, they use that for Stinney as well. Like, it's just it matters. Like, it does matter, but at the same time, it's 3 seasons ago. Like, a lot can change, and a lot has changed in 3 seasons. So, I honestly, just a personal preference, I would have preferred Nick Leverett there. I think the reason that Nick Leverett isn't in there is probably because also, I don't know if you remember earlier in the season, there was a question. I forget what game it was. There was a question about Cody Mauch and if he was going to be able to play. And they said that if he wasn't going to be able to play, it was going to be Aaron Stinney in that spot and not Nick Leverett. I think the reason for that is Nick Leverett got some experience at center in the preseason, and Aaron Stinney hasn't. So I think basically their thought process is you put Nick Leverett at guard. If Nick Leverett gets hurt, you don't have a backup center. Like Nick Leverett gets hurt and Robert Hainsey gets hurt in the same game. Oh, who you putting at center? So I think that's maybe their thought process behind starting Stinney. So hopefully, Stinney, I mean, Matt Filer, I think, was the weakest link on the offensive line. But I thought that coming into the season too. Like I thought, I did think there was a chance Cody Mauch could struggle, just like Luke Gedeke did, in his career, first year. Small school guy going up against, NFL offensive lineman, changing a position. I think Mauch has definitely had his ups and downs. Like there's been some rough moments, but there's been some solid moments as well. I think he's going to be a solid pro. But at the same time, like when you looked at his offensive line, Matt Filer was probably the weakest link, right? I mean, there's some that may say Luke Gedeke, but I was like, Because again, when I talked about this on the postgame show, like Matt Filer, everybody's like, oh, he's a solid veteran. Okay, there's a reason he signed basically for the vet minimum and nobody else wanted him. Like when offensive line play is at a premium in this league right now, right? Offensive line is so valuable in this league. Everybody looked at Matt Filer and said, nope, And so hopefully Aaron Stinnie's a little bit better and hopefully it provides a boost for the run game. I don't think Filer's been awful in the past game, but hopefully it can provide a little bit of a boost. Filer also had 2 penalties. I believe both were pre-snap penalties on Sunday. Excuse me. So, yeah, we'll see. I would prefer Nick Leverett. I understand why they're not going to Leverett, but we'll see what Stinnie has.
I won't come out and say that this has, the potential to be a straight-up upgrade. I won't say that yet. But I do feel like, and this isn't any sources of any kind, this is just a gut feeling that I have, but I do feel like there is a very real possibility that Aaron Stinnie is just going to take this job and have it for the rest of the season if he stays healthy. I mean, do you feel like that could be realistic if he goes in there and, because for him to go in there and play better than Filer has, I don't think is necessarily
very difficult.
I do feel like there is a chance that between Leverett and Stinnie, however that shakes out, if Leverett doesn't see it, because again, you talked about the center situation, between those two guys, though, if they do get some serious reps in the regular season, I feel like they're just going to take that job and then not give it back. Because I feel like the Bucs have to know that Filer is definitely not going to be your answer at left guard.
Well, yeah, and you have to know, like, is he going to be, like, in the NFL in 3-4 years? Like, right. and like they signed, I'm not saying they signed him with the intention of him being their long-term left guard. But like, and Aaron Stinnie's not going to be their long-term left guard either. He's already like 28 or 29 years old. And Nick Leverett's like 26. Like, you probably don't have your long-term left guard on your roster right now. Like, that's something you're going to have to find in free agency or the draft. Like, you're just going to have to find that. But I do think it's possible that Aaron Stinnie just plays well enough and the Bucs are like, hey, man, like, it's look better, and we're going to roll with this. Like, I don't think, Matt Filer's spot is guaranteed at all. I mean, it sucks, losing your job to injury always would suck, but I do think if Aaron Stinnie plays well enough, like, they'll keep giving him that shot. I don't see why not.
Safety Kayvon Merriweather, the only other Buccaneers player out for Thursday night with an ankle injury. Wide receiver Chris Godwin with a neck injury. Baker Mayfield with a knee. And Vita Vea with a groin injury were all listed as questionable, but I have to assume all 3 of them are going to give it a go. Chris Godwin.
I think the only one with the semi question there is Vita Vea, but like, it's expected that all of them should be able to go.
Yeah, short week, a lot of pressure on a guy like Vita, who not only is 350 pounds, but he was on the injury report peppered throughout last week as well. So if this is a week-to-week thing, could be a pain tolerance issue, could be something that the Bucs are going to monitor. Maybe he's on a snap count. I have no idea, but I am going to assume he's going to be ready to go for Thursday Night Football in Buffalo. For the Bills, tight end Dawson Knox, who is one of those players who, again,
he's a player.
He's a buck killer. He's just one of those players that has it written all over him, kind of like Greg Olsen was for the Panthers. Something about Dawson
I feel
Knox.
like that's any tight end.
Yeah, that is true, especially against this zone coverage that we've talked so much about. Dawson Knox with a wrist injury will be out for Buffalo. Linebacker Balin Spector with a hamstring will miss this game. Tight end Quentin Morris with an ankle injury will be out.
Now 2 tight ends.
Yeah, defensive tackle Ed Oliver with a toe injury is questionable. That was the biggest one.
I love Ed Oliver. Yeah. I've always loved Ed Oliver. I wanted them to draft Ed Oliver at 5 over Devin White.
Yeah, I remember we were doing those draft shows leading up to 2019, and we were talking a lot about Ed Oliver and some of the other guys in that draft class. It's crazy, man. It feels like just a year ago we were talking about that.
That is insane. That's 5 years ago, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So the Bills obviously going to be spread a little bit thin, especially at the tight end position. And I will say, before we get to our score predictions, I know you're not going to be the one to say it, so I will. The Bills look beatable.
Oh, no.
The Bills, as of right now in the season.
They just lost to the freaking Patriots. Are you kidding me?
Losers of their last 2 out of 3, and they barely squeaked one by against the New York Giants.
Shouldn't have.
Yeah, seemingly are not a great team this year either.
Well, no, but also the ref screwed the Giants in that. So
sure.
Yes, that was that holding Darren Waller in the end zone thing, like clear hold, no call.
That was ridiculous. They just wanted to get out of there. It was a pretty awful game that night, I will admit. So with that being said, both teams coming into this desperate for a win. The Bucs on the road, which honestly, the Bucs are proven to be a better road team than they are at home. I mean, what do they have? One win over Chicago in all the games they played in Raymond James?
1-3 at home, 2-0 on the road.
You hope that streak continues. I think Buffalo is a beatable looking team. I think they're in a vulnerable position, but they're going to be playing desperate football. They know it's a short week. They are playing injured, which again bodes well for Tampa Bay. But the Bucs, as they look to get healthy, they're looking to avoid losing 3 in a row. That's just what it comes down to. These are two desperate teams. They're going to be playing their asses off. It's going to be Thursday night football. It's going to be cold up in Buffalo. It's not quite the end of November or December yet, but it's still going to be a little chilly. The coldest game the Bucs have played so far this season. So, I don't think the Bucs are going to be able to get it done. And I say that just because even though they are 3-3 and they have shown us flashes of what they can be when things go well, there's not going to be any run game. If Ed Oliver plays, you can nip that right in the bud. I think another week in a row where I'm unsure of what run game we're going to see. I do think Baker is going to play better, but is he going to make all the throws that he needs to? Because with this run game being what it is, he's got to make a few extra throws every week. He just has to. And he's shown that every single week he cannot make those extra throws. So I don't know if on a short week he's going to be able to do it. So, ugly game, Thursday night football. Not quite as ugly as the Atlanta game was because that was just pitiful. I think the penalties are cleaned up. I think it's more of a disciplined contest. But I have the Buccaneers dropping this one 21-17.
Okay. So yeah, the Bills are beatable. Losers the last 2 or 3. Lost, week 1 against the Jets. Gave that game away. Josh Allen is prone to the turnover. He can turn the ball over. I think he's like one of the last true gunslingers this league has. Honestly, Baker Mayfield, okay, but I'm talking just gunslinger, a dude that just the play's never over, because he says it ain't over, right?
It's crazy too because he's regarded as a top 5 QB in the NFL, which I won't argue with, but from week to week, you almost literally never know what you're going to get. And he's one of the better QBs that you have watched with that trait, these recent seasons. Jameis was the last guy I can think of where when he's good, man, but you never know what you're going to get. And even then, he was never touted as a top 5 QB.
No, because his good isn't like Josh Allen good. Josh Allen makes throws and makes plays that Winston just never did. So and the thing about the Bills run defense is actually pretty bad. It's the worst that the Bucs will have faced so far this year. I think it might be 31st in the league. Their run defense, it's not good. Now, I've already said, not talking about the run game anymore because they suck. I do not expect the Buccaneers to be able to run the ball. It doesn't matter, right? Now, will they find a little bit more success? Maybe, just because that's how bad Buffalo is at it. But I'm not expecting them to go for over 100 yards rushing unless Baker Mayfield gets 80 of it. And look, even the Bills defense, their pass defense, Trey White, obviously out for the year, big loss. Matt Milano, probably out for the year, big loss. Their defense has had a lot of hits. I think that's 2 of their better defensive players right there. And I just think, the Bills just have too much. On a short week, on the road, after a tough loss, I just think, the Bills just have a bit too much for the Bucs. Somehow, I don't know, the Bucs are going to score 3 touchdowns. Might be a garbage time touchdown, but the Bills are going to win 31-21. So the spread, I believe, is 8.5. The spread is 8.5. I think it might be something where it's 31-14. Bucs score a touchdown with a minute left. Make it 31-21. Make it look a little bit more respectable. But Yeah, so like I said, somehow they're going to get over 20 points, but they won't come out with the W.
So you're taking the Bills and the points.
Bills and the points. Bills and the points and the over, actually. Check out betting the Bucs on Mr. Bucs Nation.
Oh, there you go. It sucks. I never like it when
and also I did take Rashad White over rushing yards too, so we'll see. I've taken that like 10 times this year and it hasn't hit. So
what's his number this week? Like 20 yards?
Well, I wish. It's 46.5. That's pretty much what it's been every week. And I'm like, oh, he's got to do it this week. And I'm like, oh, no, he didn't. So, I wasn't going to, this was going to be the week I was going to bet the under. And then I remembered, I was like, man, the Bills' run defense is like legit the worst that they've faced so far. I'm like, watch, I'm going to bet this under, and then he's going to have like 90 yards. So I was like, all right, let me just kick the over.
And they're busted up too. I'll tell you, if they give Rashad White 15 carries, let's just do a little prop here at the end of the show. If they give Rashad White 15 carries, I think he goes well over 46 yards. I don't know about well over, but I think he goes over 46 yards this week. If they give him 15 carries, because last week they simply gave up on the run. I mean, last week was kind of the first week that, aside from the blowout against Detroit, where they simply just gave up on running the football. So I don't think that'll change this week. I do think with what you said about the run defense, they may have a better chance, but everything about this run game has to be better, and that's a pretty tall order for them to fill. But ladies,
so all right, let me ask you this really quick before we head out.
You're good.
And this is going to be probably a tough question to answer. After this game, when we're doing that post-game show, right? A little over 24 hours from when we're doing this right now. Are you going to come into it saying, Baker Mayfield, all right, you dodge that challenge, right? Like you got over the hump. Or are you going to be saying, uh-oh, like there might be in trouble? Where do you think you're going to be at? Because you only got him scoring 17 points. And basically, like I said, I think it's going to be a garbage time touchdown. So I only got him basically scoring 14 points. Like, where do you think, what are your expectations? Are you going to be feeling better? All right, here's this. Better, worse, or the same about Baker than you do right now?
It is interesting because you bring up the 17 points, and I just talked about how the Bucs probably aren't going to have that much success running the ball, but again, we talked about how the Bills look beatable, and the games that the Bucs have won, they've had success running the football. So if they get 17 points and Rashad White has 50 yards, I'm going to assume that Baker threw the ball 35, 40 times. 35 seems to be the magic number when everything goes according to plan. The best games that he's played, he threw the ball like 34 times. I want to say I'm going to be feeling about the same, though, because if it's a 17-21 or 17-24 loss, I think I said 21. If it's a 17-point loss in a
17-point loss?
Well, no, hold on. If it's a loss, if it's a loss and they put up 17 points, and let's say Buffalo only puts up 21, I assume it's a competitive game. I assume there's a decent amount of defense. Maybe there was a lot of chewing the clock by one team or the other. But just off of speculation alone, I would think with that box score, I would probably feel about the same. Okay. I think the difference would be on the offense yet again, because if you hold Buffalo to 21 points, I know that they're not the scoring offense that they have been.
Yeah.
But they are still a great quarterback and a capable offense with some weapons still.
Stephon Diggs is still one of the best in the NFL.
Gabe Davis, very effective in the red zone. Yeah. So they have threats. I would think that the only thing missing would be the same thing that's been missing from this offense, or at least the biggest difference maker that I can see that's the closest within reach, if you know what I'm trying to say, and that would be the missed throws by Baker. The 3rd and 13 incompletion overthrowing Chris Godwin when it could have been a first down in the red zone, and you have to punt the ball away instead of get 3 points there. I would think that if my prediction comes true, 17-21 loss, then I think I'm feeling about the same. But I think if you come away from this game feeling about the same, a loss is disappointing, but I almost feel like it buys Baker another week. If you come out of this game,
it definitely would. Yeah,
if you come out of this game and you think, oh, this guy sucks, like he's ass, he played worse than he did last week, then he's obviously in trouble.
Yeah, he's in trouble, but at the same time, like, I think he's getting the week 9 anyway. Like,
Yeah.
unless this is just a disaster. I mean, it is. Because at the same time, dude, they lose the game. You're 3-4. Like, okay. Like what would suck is like if you lose and Atlanta wins, that would suck. I mean, Atlanta would be 5-3. You'd be 3-4. You're 2 games back, and Atlanta has the tiebreaker over you. That would suck. Like, and especially if Mayfield struggles, that's where you're like, okay, like this season may be going down the drain. But like, yeah, I think he's gonna get week 9 regardless. So like, I don't expect the Bucs to win. And I sort of agree. I think you're gonna feel largely the same about Baker Mayfield as you do right now. Like, kind of like, not like, oh, it's doomsday, but also not like, oh, this is great. Like, I don't think you're going to be feeling great, but like, I don't think you're also going to be feeling like he's awful. They have to they got to put in trash because they got to do something. Like, I don't think you're going to be feeling that way either.
Yeah, I don't think so. But looking forward to an entertaining game regardless. A short week for the Bucs, but both teams in this game in desperate need of a win. We will talk to you guys on the post-game edition of the Cannon Fire podcast. I think tomorrow night after the game. I think we'll tough it out, right? I think we'll do a late stream, maybe take a couple phone calls. Wrap that thing up about 11:45 midnight. What is it, 8:15 kickoff?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, Thursday Night Football on Prime Video. Don't forget that as well, because every time I go to watch Thursday Night Football, I'm on YouTube TV for about 5 minutes before I remember that it's on Prime Video still.
Where is this thing? Hang on.
Yeah. Should be a good game, though. Al Michaels, Kirk Herbstreit in the booth. We love those guys. And no Taylor Swift. Thank God. That's just about going to do it for this week's game preview edition of the Cannon Fire podcast. Thank you to everybody hanging out with us in the live chat. I know we didn't pay too much attention to you tonight, but we had a lot of stats we had to get through. Willie Beeman, the moderator, holding it down. Frank G, bandwagoner. JC Allen hanging out with us. My buddy Jay, Captain Jack Rackham, a Raiders super fan. So we got some enemy fans checking in, but we're glad to have you. Sal 319, Ryan Flanagan, Richard T from the West Coast, and anybody else that I may have missed. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us tonight. Some score predictions: 27-17 Bills, says JC Allen. Bucs 27-19, says San Anto Gatto. 27-13, says Sal 319. And do we have one more? No, we don't. At least we got one Bucs prediction in there. We got one Bucs win prediction on the show, and that's enough for me to hold out hope that they can definitely get this thing done. Because I don't care if my pick is wrong every week. I really don't. You know what I mean? Like, I would rather pick the Bucs to lose and be wrong about it every single week. It is what it is at this point, but should be a fun game. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Bucs news as it happens. Speaking of Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. I know it's a short week, so maybe not too much before the game tomorrow, but what have you got for the rest of the week?
Yeah, so obviously had the reactions out. So if you do want to relive the Bucs Falcons game, probably won't. But if you do want to relive that, you can check that out, Bucs Nation, right now. And then also tomorrow, we'll have the Q&A out with the Buffalo Bills SB Nation site. So keep an eye on that. And then we're just keeping it rolling.
Last but not least, you can find myself Instagram and Twitter /X. At Rhettakus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. But that's the show. Once again, we'll talk to you live right here, youtube.com/Cannon Fire Podcast. Thursday night following the game. Win, lose, or draw. Should be a good one. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, signing off for my co-host, Evan Wanish. We'll talk to you in the next one. Until then, and as always, thank you again for listening, and go Bucs.